What is going on, Stack in the Box? My name is Mike Luciano. Welcome to the Stack in the Box NFL Recap Show. Week 15, the regular season is winding down right here. Teams are starting to get eliminated. The contenders are starting to separate themselves. Some of the pretenders are kind of fading away out of the playoff picture. We're finally heading towards some resolution. And boy, did some of those resolutions come in wild, zany ways, depressing ways for some fan bases, elative ones for other ones. Let's get into it. But first, as always, subscribe to Stack in the Box on all the podcast platforms, Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you are. We're on all those spots. And make sure to subscribe on YouTube. Leave this stream a like. It really does help with the algorithm. It's not for ego. It's for the business end of things. Eternally grateful if that is how you choose to show your support. But with that, let's just get right into the one big takeaway this week. And it came courtesy of a team that I thought was dead as a dinosaur, those damn Buffalo Bills, because the Bills, not only were they losing winnable games, and not only did they have one hell of a schedule coming up with seemingly every first or second place team in the league they had to go up against. The whole Sean McDermott report comes out about the whole 9/11 story, and it just, the vibes were horrendous. Even though Josh Allen was playing well, he had the turnover things, but pretty much every metric you look at, Josh Allen's playing pretty well this year with a team around him that I don't think is that good. I still think even with that the Bills were honestly pretty dead. And then they get the Cowboys at home, granted, and they just beat the brakes off them in a way that it shocked me as equally as much in a bad way. It shocked me with Dallas as it did a positive way with Buffalo, because the Cowboys looked almost invincible for a long period of time. The Cowboys, too. Now, here's an important stat I think you got to realize, too, with the Cowboys now. They are now 3-4 on the road and undefeated at home. That home field advantage in Dallas is unlike pretty much any other in the league with how big it is and how they sell out every game. Like, that's a legitimate nightmare to walk into. On the road, they've looked pretty average. And I know Josh Allen didn't have his best game, only 94 yards passing. And most of them, I believe 90 of them, went to Stephon Diggs or James Cook, oddly enough. James Cook was obviously the star of the game, having over 220 total yards, a couple of scores. But what shocked me in this game, as much as it did in a good way with Buffalo, because Buffalo finally looked like they could look a good defense dead in the eye, and it didn't have to just be Josh Allen going crazy, because that's been their formula for however long, is Josh Allen going crazy. Now they finally have a running game. After losing some big names, the defense finally knuckled up and shut down a very good offense in Dallas. It's encouraging, but man, the Cowboys, what on earth was that? As someone who's been banging the Dak Prescott MVP drum, with how close this race is, because Patrick Mahomes for a while would just kind of, it used to be Mahomes or bust. Now that he's having kind of a down year by his standards, Dak was right in the front, and there's other guys too. Brock Purdy, Christian McCaffrey, we'll get into those two a little bit later. Lamar Jackson, even Allen himself, depending on what your voting criteria is. This had to be a game where he really needed to separate, and he just didn't do it. He just straight up didn't do it. Poor play. He looked kind of off-center the entire game. Only 134 yards. He really never got anything vertical. His longest play was 16 yards, which for Dallas, the verticality and the big plays, that's been what's really impressed me this year, is how they've been able to get that even with a Brian Schottenheimer offense. This looked like all the worst parts of Brian Schottenheimer. And the worst part about the Cowboys, too, is we'll get into later when we do the Monday night preview for the Philadelphia Eagles against the Seattle Seahawks. The Cowboys better hope and pray that the Eagles lose this game, because after this, the Eagles have Giants, Cardinals, Giants. Can't get an easier schedule down the stretch than potentially 2 Tommy DeVito starts and the Cardinals, who have Kyler Murray but are kind of a mess outside of that. The Cowboys may have just lost the division with this game. And this was not a couple bad breaks. This was not all the refs at the end. This wasn't 34-31 and both teams gave it their all and you're like, damn, that was a fantastic game. It just didn't come out right. This was a butt kicking. This was a butt kicking in front of everybody, and it really is almost disqualifying for a lot of it. It might disqualify Dak for the MVP race. I heard some weird Coach of the Year rumblings about Mike McCarthy. I don't know if that's coming after that. I mean, it's hard to really undersell the magnitude of the screw-up. from Dallas here. They'll get a chance to rectify it, I think. And Dak Prescott's good enough where he's going to play okay, but they have a couple humongous games. They basically, I think, have to win out now and have the Eagles lose to Seattle for them to have a shot at the division, because they get Miami on the road, and we just saw what Miami did to the Jets. Easy to make fun of the Jets. That's a good defense. Put up 30 on them without Tyreek Hill. That's certainly an opponent where I don't even know if the Cowboys will be favored in that game. Then they get everybody's darlings, the Lions, at home, and then a rivalry game against Washington. None of these games, I think, are particularly easy. Washington, maybe, but you know what? Rivalry game, Week 18, maybe they go balls out. You can't count that as a win, in my opinion, if you're Dallas. Will the Giants for the Eagles? Tommy DeVito versus Sam Howell. A little bit different. In terms of Buffalo in the AFC, too, they're not in the playoff picture right now. Like, the season ended today, Buffalo would not be in the wild card. And it's tough right now because right now there are 5, 8, and 6 teams in the AFC. But if you look at them, just 1 through 5, there's Jacksonville, who has Trevor Lawrence, who's a really good quarterback, but they've lost 3 in a row. He's banged up, and the roster is showing some flaws. Indianapolis is the Gardner Minshew bandwagon going to run out of pixie dust at some point. Houston we like, but rookie quarterback, rookie head coach. Can they hold it together for these last 3 games? Cincinnati, we love Jake Browning, but he's still a backup quarterback. And then Buffalo. The Bills have a chance to get in the playoffs, and because the divisions are kind of wonky this year, they could get a pretty advantageous matchup with 2 games against the Chargers, who, I mean, they're going to be a huge favorite in that game. They're going to travel well. Easton Stick is playing. Then they get New England at home. They lost to them early in the year. I don't think they lose to New England at home. And then Miami on the road. There's a good chance by that point Miami may have locked up a certain seed. Maybe they end up with the 1 seed. Maybe they get locked into 2 very early. They don't play Tua Tagovailoa the whole game. That could be a win. So because of that, Buffalo, just when it looked like everything was dead and the sky was falling, saved their season, and I think maybe position themselves as probably the best potential wild card team in the AFC. And you know what? I got to give credit to Sean McDermott in coaching, because other coaches would have folded and other teams would have folded, and they did not. And I'm very impressed with that. So it's time for the stock report, where we find out who is thriving and who is struggling, because there were a lot of struggling teams, as we'll get to this week. But let's go and start with the positives. Bow down, Baker Mayfield. What a game. Not only a perfect passer rating game for Baker Mayfield, but he became the first player in NFL history to have a perfect passer rating as a visitor in Lambeau Field. 22 of 28, 381 yards. That's 13.6 yards per attempt for all the kiddos scoring at home. 4 touchdowns, no picks. And if I told you earlier in the year, because Baker Mayfield has a weird stigma attached to his name, if I told you that a team signed a quarterback and he's a free agent at the end of this year, and they're thinking of getting rid of him after he completes 63% of his passes, throws for 3,300 yards, 24 touchdowns, and just 8 interceptions, you'd be saying, what are you, nuts? What are you, crazy? Why would they ever do that? He's playing great. And you know what? He is playing great. In a year where generally Derek Carr, I think, hasn't really lived up to what we thought he would be coming over to the Saints. Like, he's made some plays, but I think they thought a little bit more of, or they had higher hopes than what he's shown. Carolina's been a mess, and Atlanta can't find a quarterback. Baker Mayfield's probably the best quarterback in that division. It's easy to want to just draft a quarterback, especially this year where probably there's going to be 6 guys going in the first 2 rounds. I think certainly 4 first-rounders in Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, and Michael Penix. And then you get guys like Bo Nix and J.J. McCarthy that could be day 2 guys. Like, it's very tempting to get a guy who could sit for a year and then take it over. But at the same time, I'm looking at these numbers, and the fact that Tampa's now 7-7 and has a very good chance to host a home playoff game, probably against Dallas or Philly. And I'm saying, why would you even consider getting rid of them? It just makes too much sense to keep them. I'm happy for Baker, too. as I've said before on the show, I think his big problem was he never really got any cohesion, any consistency, because every time he got a coach he liked, they would leave, somebody would get fired. I believe he's had a different offensive coordinator in pretty much every season. And he's gone from Cleveland to Carolina to the Rams to Tampa. Like, he just needs a guy to sit down and go, you're the man. Here's our offense. Learn it. Cleveland did that for a while, and by the third year, he had a really good year. COVID year and all, but a really good year. I'm happy that he's found another spot. And Tampa Bay is not, they may not have the pedigree of a lot of other franchises, but they've won 2 Super Bowls. Very rarely are they like awful, unwatchable. Even when they were the one year, they ended up getting Jameis and they ended up looking okay after that. But this is not a dysfunctional, crazy organization. I could see them rolling with Baker Mayfield for a little bit. Because if this is how he plays in Dave Canales' offense, how many more upgrades are going to be available? Let's move on to the Sunday night game where I was really let down by the Jaguars. And I know that the Ravens are probably the best team in the AFC. Lamar Jackson's still cooking. That defense is a freaking menace. Even in the you got to hire an offensive coach thing. I think Mike Macdonald, the defensive coordinator of the Ravens, is going to be a head coach very, very soon. He's just a wizard over there. I was kind of let down by the Jaguars. And Trevor Lawrence a little bit, but I don't want to be too hard because he's playing. Number one, he had a concussion. Number two, he's playing on a sprained ankle that was so severe. I mean, the diagnosis early was going to be, well, how much time is he going to miss? And he didn't miss any. So I got to credit him for toughing it out. But I kind of thought Jacksonville's roster, 1-53, was a little bit better than what I'm seeing right now. Now they've lost 3 straight. And Lawrence playing hurt obviously is hurting them. But I think people aren't talking enough about the loss of Christian Kirk for the year. Christian Kirk has been one of the most underrated players in the league for a very long time. And he, I think, is honestly, I don't think either him or Calvin Ridley are a number one right now. But I think Christian Kirk is probably closer. I don't think Calvin Ridley's a number one receiver in the league. I just don't. Because they're trying to have him as a number one right now, and he's not as effective. He's a great number two. A great number two. But now you got to run the passing game through Calvin Ridley and Evan Engram for a team that throws the ball a lot, and that's just not working. And then complemented with Travis Etienne kind of falling back to earth a little bit, and Etienne not putting up the crazy games he had earlier in the year. And this offense is just, it's stuck in neutral right now. Maybe when Lawrence gets healthy, and maybe when they don't have back-to-back games against arguably the 2 best defenses in the league in Cleveland and Baltimore, maybe that'll shake itself out. But now the Jaguars are 8-6, and also Houston is 8-6. When they get C.J. Stroud back, they're going to be cooking. And the Colts are 8-6 with a Coach of the Year favorite in Shane Steichen. Minshew has been playing very well lately. You can't discount them. So the Jaguars may have blown a very winnable division at this point. And this is the scary part, too, for Jacksonville. This might have been the last year where it was kind of your division to lose, where you're the top dog, because the Texans have their guy in Stroud. He's only going to get better. Anthony Richardson is going to come back next year for the Colts, who have built a pretty good program over there. And even the Titans, I think, have found something with Will Levis. They just need to get him an offensive line. This division is not the all shucks AFC South anymore. They got 4 great young quarterbacks. Trevor Lawrence is good enough to make up for a lot of it, but not all of it. And I feel like Jacksonville, they're the ultimate, I don't want to call them an average team, but I feel like every team they're supposed to beat, they usually end up beating. And then every time they have to go kind of elevate themselves and play a Baltimore or a Kansas City or even a San Francisco where they got crushed earlier this year, then they start faltering. So they beat who they're supposed to beat, lose who they're supposed to lose. 2. And I think eventually that's going to come back and bite them and really hurt their championship aspirations, no matter how good Lawrence is. Bengals-Vikings, Jake Browning. I feel like the Bengals are almost upset with Jake Browning now because I think the theory was, all right, he's just going to hold his own, play okay. Chips will fall where they may, come whenever may. And then we'll reevaluate in the offseason. At least we know we'll probably have a good backup in Browning. These games, he's been playing so well. I don't think any team is going to pay him to be a starter right away, but he's going to get a contract that I think either makes him the highest paid backup or like a fringe starter for a team who picks a rookie quarterback. I mean, this is not just like okay backup numbers. These are preposterous numbers. He's completing 74% of his passes. His passer rating right now is 107. That would be one of the highest ranks in the league. 8.7 yards per attempt. If you didn't change the jersey numbers, those numbers are flipped around. There was still number 9 out there and Joe Burrow. You wouldn't be able to tell the difference right now between Burrow and Browning. It's that similar. And he did it against a Vikings defense that had just shut out the Raiders the week before. They blitz like double what everybody else blitzes. Brian Flores is crazy. And they had this unique scheme that alternates between jailbreak, we're coming for your blitzes, and dropping 8 into coverage. It's very confusing. It's very unsettling. Didn't affect Jake Browning. Leads a comeback. I know it was against Nick Mullins, but they still put up 24 points in that game. He still had to come back, and he did. Jake Browning, man, and a true story of perseverance, too, because this is a guy, crazy good high school recruit. I think he threw like 90 touchdowns his last year in high school. Great career at Washington, got banged up twice, bunch of shoulder operations, was on the Vikings, bounced around. It's really a triumph for the human spirit that he kept going as long as he did, finally got in an advantageous position, and now here we are. He's leading the Bengals to potentially a playoff berth because that defense is still really good. The weapons are still good. They just got the right trigger man to make it all happen in Jake Browning. Lions-Broncos. Jared Goff, 5 touchdowns. Shout out Jared Goff. Shout out Ben Johnson, who is everybody's new darling, the object of everybody's desire, or at least everybody who needs a new coach or could fire their current coach. Everybody wants Ben Johnson. And I could just use this as an opportunity to give you chapter and verse about how great those two are, Goff and Ben Johnson. Like those two together specifically. I think they just mesh really well. But I think the Broncos defense kind of exposed themselves because I had been thrilled with how they've been playing defense. I mean, they gave up 70 points in a game to the Dolphins. And since then, I know that Russell Wilson has improved a lot. He's still not amazing, but he's much better than he was last year. But the improved defense is why Denver is winning these games. They gave up 31 to the Zach Wilson-led Jets, which sounds awful because it was. Immediately after that, here's how many points they led up. 19, 17, 9, 22, 20, 12, 22, 7. Tremendous. Tremendous. And then the Lions come in and beat the brakes off them. I mean, Goff, did he ever get hit ever? His jersey was pristinely clean. There's a talent issue on that Denver defense, and I think that might be the bigger issue because Vance Joseph, to his credit, has made some schematic changes. They got Justin Simmons back. He obviously helps a lot, but I think what I saw in this game was they played out of their minds for a very long time, and then finally they had to go. The devil came to collect his due, and they regressed to the mean, and it showed that this defense really isn't above average or even average. If you just go, look who the starters are. I think they just kind of caught people by surprise. Now the Lions have adjusted. Will the Broncos adjust? Remains to be seen. Saints-Giants. Derek Carr, man. Find me a guy. I know that everybody hates being a mid quarterback because, especially Derek Carr, because he was one of those guys in that Kirk Cousins-y tier for however long where he was always good enough where he was never the problem. And I don't think he was the problem with the Raiders. In every game, a defense or coach was getting fired. His best weapon, Henry Ruggs, ends up getting into a crash and killing somebody in a horrible incident. Like, the Raiders were chaos, so he was never the biggest problem, but you can just see you're not really going to win a Super Bowl, I don't think, with Derek Carr. So because of that, too, the Saints fans have been turning on him lately because I think they expected the savior, and he hasn't been the savior. But I'll give him credit through all the boos and all of that. He's taken this team that I think right now is in the playoffs as the season ended today, and there has been an actual improvement in his play. Like, I remember against the Jaguars, he ended up losing on Thursday Night Football. And since then, even though there was a losing streak in there, his passer rating since that game pretty tidy 105.2, 10 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, completion percentage at 72%. And I do legitimately think that Pete Carmichael is a little too conservative, if I'm being honest, because everything's just dump offs to Alvin Kamara. I'd like to see Carr kind of turn it loose a little bit more, but he's still good enough where if things are working around him, this team can win some games. They have a manageable schedule coming up right now. They have a very pivotal game against the Rams. I think one of them is getting in the wild card, and I think this will determine who it is. Then they get Tampa and Atlanta. So these are games. I don't think there's any unwinnable games here for New Orleans. If Derek Carr keeps playing like this, granted he was aided by Tommy DeVito playing for the Giants. He just got swallowed up by a still pretty good Saints defense. But there's an avenue here for Derek Carr to keep winning some games, keep performing well. And I'd be happy if that happens. I feel like he put up with a lot of crap with the Raiders. I kind of want to see him do well. Browns-Bears. I want Justin Fields to really succeed. I still think they're probably going to end up trading him to a team like Atlanta or Pittsburgh because they got the number 1 pick and it'll be Caleb Williams or Drake May. But if you look at the Bears right now, who have 5 wins and I believe the number 5 pick as season ender right now, they have 5 wins. They could legitimately have 8 and be a playoff team right now had it not been for 3 terrible collapses that this team has had, one of which was earlier in the year against the Broncos when they were winless. They were up, like Justin Fields had 4 touchdowns, couldn't even get him a win with 4 touchdown passes. Then they blow it again against the Lions, divisional opponent, in spectacular fashion. And then this again to the Browns. Fields, too, at the second half was pretty atrocious, but that they legitimately would have had 8 wins. And then I don't think they would have got rid of Justin Fields if they did that, if they had 8 wins. But they have 5, and I think it's easier to do kind of a clean reboot, especially with Eberflus, because I thought he actually was doing a good job of kind of saving his job a little bit, because Fields have been looking a lot better, even with the deficiencies they have on offense. And the defense, I got to give them credit. For the most part, since Alan Williams is no longer the coach, they're performing a lot better since October 15th. Here's how many points they've surrendered. We're going to do this again. 19, 12, 30, outlier game to the Chargers. 24, 16, 31, outlier game to the Lions. 10, 13, 20. Like, that's a real defense by a defensive coach and Matt Eberflus. And they just can't win these games. And that, to me, falls on coaching. Because I feel like if you had even an average coach, all right, I'll spot you 1. Maybe they don't win all 3 games, but I think they win probably 2 of them. And then you're 7-7 with your third-year improving quarterback, Justin Fields. And then who knows what will happen. I think eventually they're going to have to clean house. I don't know if Ryan Poles will be around for it because Ryan Poles drafted Justin Fields. Didn't draft Justin Fields. He hired Matt Eberflus. So I don't know if they want to just wipe the slate clean here again and start over with Caleb Williams or Drake May, but they had a legitimate chance to make this current regime more appealing. And Matt Eberflus, defensive coach, calling the defense, I think he really bungled it. And now it's time for rapid fire takes. Well, we'll just get some quick takes off on the remaining games, and then we'll preview Philly and Seattle on Monday Night Football. And we start with 49ers Cardinals, a game that solidified my MVP pick. And I think it's Christian McCaffrey. Here's where I'm conflicted, because I don't want the quarterback award to be the MVP award to be the quarterback award, the best quarterback in the league. And Purdy's numbers, Brock Purdy's numbers are historically good. 10 yards an attempt, 119 passer rating, 29 touchdowns, which leads the league right now. Like, Purdy's obviously proven himself, franchise guy, but when I just watch this team, like, so much of how this amazing mega Death Star offense operates is all off of Christian McCaffrey, who's currently leading the league with 1,800 yards from scrimmage and 20 touchdowns. For a team that, outside of that weird 3-game malaise when everybody was hurt, has looked damn near unstoppable. McCaffrey's my guy, but I also don't want this to come off as anti-Purdy. So I think he's doing a really good job. It's not his fault that he has all these great playmakers around him. But damn, it'd be hard-pressed for me to look at Christian McCaffrey's year and say, yeah, you don't deserve the MVP. Chiefs-Patriots. I didn't think I'd have much to say about that, what with Kansas City being so much better than New England. And I don't want to just beat up on guys when they're down. But I'm sorry. Kadarius Toney. I'm genuinely not trying to be hot takey or hyperbolic or just try to get reaction out of people. Like, they should cut him. Or at least deactivate him. Kadarius Toney, you hear his name every single week, right? Because he's doing something stupid. So you'd think that, wow, he at least has got to be pretty involved for him to getting all this attention. No. He has 169 yards receiving this year. That is it. That's all he's got. Mixed in with that are an offsides penalty that ruined their Bills' comeback. And for the second time this season, Kadarius Toney's had a ball go right off his hands into a waiting defender's arms. Now, against the Lions, it was a pick six, and they barely lost. You could argue that cost them the Lions game. You can point to two games, which is the difference between where the Chiefs are now and the number one seed in the AFC, that they lost exclusively because of Kadarius Toney. And then they had another one with Valdez-Scantling in the Eagles game. We don't need to relitigate that, but man, they can't keep playing Toney. You hear his name every game. Kadarius Toney has 6 games this year where he has under 10 yards receiving. He has not had more than 35 yards receiving. In fact, he's only had 4 games this year with more than 20 yards receiving. He stinks. He stinks. He's cool looking when he gets the ball and he does all those weird jukes, but he stinks. This is football. It's not juke people out. Flag football, he'd be great. Actually, I don't even know. You still got to catch the ball in flag football. Kansas City can't keep putting him out there. I know their receiving options are limited, but what does he bring to this team other than nonsense? Texans-Titans. This just made DeMeco Ryans even more of a coach of the year frontrunner because there's always the eternal debates of how much of it's the coach, how much of it's the quarterback. Well, now he didn't have the quarterback and went on the road, division rival, wearing the Houston throwbacks. So that's still a contentious issue of who really owns the Houston Oilers. Titans did all that to get to a big lead. Will Levis looks great. And then the second half, they shut him down with DeMeco Ryans' defense. And Case Keenum, of all people, keeps making plays, ends up winning the game, and has the Texans at 8-6, gunning for a postseason spot. Can't say enough good things about DeMeco Ryans. Panthers-Falcons, this game, this all-22 watch was a bad one. Actually, I thought Bryce Young played okay. Willie didn't score a touchdown. I am well aware. He's not very good. But I thought he played better than he does a lot of the time, which is really saying something. But I've supported this guy for so long. I thought he was going to be such a good quarterback. I'm out on Desmond Ridder. He's a backup. He's a fine backup. He'll get checks for however long. He's got this weird grittiness to him late. You can't make him the starter next year. You can't. You can't. The Falcons are not a bad team. They're coached poorly by Arthur Smith, but they have so many good players. Bijan, Drake London, Kyle Pitts. You get the right coach who knows how to use these guys and the right quarterback. I don't know if it's a veteran. I don't know if it's Justin Fields. I don't know if they draft a guy. I don't know who it is. But you can't keep going with Ridder because this team legitimately, I thought, could have won the NFC South this year. And then just fell to pieces in front of our eyes. Rams Commanders, never doubt Sean McVay. Ever. The Rams were regarded as a team that was not only rebuilding, but in the middle of a long rebuild. I mean, there were Matthew Stafford trade rumors for the longest time. And what do you know? He figures out, all right, a couple things weren't working early on. Let's switch some things up. We'll wait till Kyron Williams and Cooper Kupp get back, and then we'll unleash our new attack. And it's worked because this Rams team is 7-7. They've won 4 of their last 5. Their only loss being to the Ravens in overtime on the road on a punt return. And in those games, Matthew Stafford, 1,250 yards, 13 touchdowns, 2 picks. Pretty good. Pretty good, I might say. The Rams, if they beat the Saints, will be 8-7, which I think will really give them a lock wildcard spot. They get the Giants and then a 49ers team that might rest guys because they get the number 1 seed. If they play like this on offense, with Stafford cooking like this, Puka Nacua still being very good, Cooper Kupp getting healthy again, Kyron Williams emerging as a really good running back, nobody wants to see this team. And with Aaron Donald still being very good on defense, nobody wants to get the Los Angeles Rams in the postseason. And I don't know if they're not going to go to like the Super Bowl or anything like that. But you're telling me they can't pull off an upset or two? I don't know. I wouldn't doubt Sean McVay at this point. Colts Steelers. The Steelers are not going to fire Mike Tomlin. They shouldn't. He's never had a losing season. They keep outplaying their, my opinion, not great talent level, especially on the offensive side. But they need to do a big swing at quarterback because I don't think Kenny Pickett is very good. I think he's Desmond Ridder. I think he's a backup, a serviceable backup who can manage the game, but he has 13 touchdowns in 24 games as a starter. Now they're flip-flopping between Mitch Trubisky and Mason Rudolph. This isn't tenable, especially in a division with Joe Burrow next year, Lamar Jackson, and the Cleveland Browns and Deshaun Watson, who may be better, but even if he's not, have a very good roster. You can't keep going Kenny Pickett, Mason Rudolph, Mitch Trubisky. Doesn't work. If he keeps doing it, that's where I think some of the problems with Bill Belichick lately have come is loyalty to the wrong people. This would be the height of that because Mike Tomlin's a very good coach and a good motivator, and he knows his stuff on defense. They don't improve quarterback significantly, like Kirk Cousins or Justin Fields or something like that, they're dead. They're dead next year, and then I think you can really start talking about maybe this is it for Mike Tomlin. Dolphins, Jets. I mean, what do you even say about this game? Like, as impressed as I am with Miami scoring 30 points against a very good defense without Tyreek Hill, as impressed as I am with that, 0 points for the Jets. They have 2 games this year, Kansas City, Houston, where they have 2 or more offensive touchdowns. They've scored exactly 1 in 8 of those games and 0 in 4 of those games. This is as inept an offense. I don't care what numbers say. Just watching them, this is as inept an offense as I've ever seen. And the worst part is I don't know who really to blame here because everything is so bad, you can make an excuse for anybody, and you can make a scapegoat out of anybody. How can Robert Saleh win with this quarterback? How can the receivers win with this quarterback? How can Hackett call a game plan with these quarterbacks? How can the quarterbacks execute with this offensive line? How can the offensive line play well when the quarterbacks hold the ball too long? How can the receivers get open when the scheme sucks? You can do that for everything on this offense. And the worst part is none of it's changing because, number one, it's too late anyway. The season's over. You're not going to have any marginal improvements. Like, who cares if they have 2 really great offensive games? Season's already done. The worst part, though, is Aaron Rodgers is going to have these guys all back next year because he probably, at his age, doesn't want to learn another offense. So the only 2 options are Hackett gets fired and they bring in another Rodgers guy, I don't know, Tom Clements or Luke Getsy or somebody like that, or they roll it back with him. So again, if Rodgers will make this whole thing work if he's Aaron Rodgers. If he's not, then the Jets have to just blow it up at the end of next year. You got to give Saleh, in my opinion, you got to give him a year with Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers wanted to come here because of him, and he's never really had. Joe Flacco is the best NFL quarterback he's had in 3 years. You got to give him a year with that. If that doesn't work, then you reevaluate things. And I think it's time to go look at the Monday Night Football game. A game that, depending on the injuries, could either be Drew Lock versus Marcus Mariota, or Jalen Hurts versus Geno Smith. I'm going to operate as if it's the latter because that's more exciting to me. So these are two teams going in different directions, or at least right now they're going in the same direction. They were earlier in the year. Now they're going in the same direction because they both had some ugly losses. Seattle, the discussion around Seattle is really confusing me because I think a lot of their issues, like Philly, are on the defensive side of the ball. I think their scheme is kind of outdated. I don't love their front four. I don't love their linebackers. Like Bobby Wagner at this point in his career is not the Bobby Wagner you're thinking of. This is an older guy who doesn't have the same mobility. As good as the secondary is, Jamal Adams has been pretty bad this year and pretty easy to target. I think those are where the problems lie. And yet there's this weird Geno Smith's done discussion. They need to replace Geno Smith. And every time I watch Geno Smith, I'm like, are you guys nuts? Like, you look at the numbers, 15 touchdowns, 9 picks in 12 games. You're like, oh, it's a clear regression from last year. And you know what? Maybe it is. Did you expect Geno Smith to lead the league in completion percentage and throw 30 touchdowns every year? Maybe that's a bit much. But he's still a really good quarterback for the Seahawks. And he's got a good collection of receivers with DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. I mean, find me how many guys 1, 2, 3 are that effective. And yet it's still all – I know the quarterback gets too much of the shine when they win, too much of the blame when they lose, but it's getting to weird levels with Geno Smith. I think because maybe there's a lot of residual – I remember Geno Smith on the Jets and he was bad, and I think he's still bad, but he's not that kind of guy anymore. He's overcoming a beat-up offensive line, a beat-up backfield because Kenneth Walker's had some problems, a rookie receiver in Smith and Jigba, and the fact he's always having to get into shootouts. Because this defense, I mean, for crying out loud, they played Dallas in Dallas and put up 35 points, and he goes for 334 yards and 3 touchdowns, and somehow Geno Smith gets the short end of the stick and the blame in a lot of these games. I'm like, what are you looking at here? Doesn't make any sense. I think part of it, too, is just frustration on the Seahawks' part because they had now lost 3 straight games. I don't think they're necessarily going to be a huge favorite in this one. I haven't checked the lines. I don't think they're going to be an overwhelming favorite in this one. And then you look at the schedule coming up. It looks favorable just on first glance. Titans on the road, Steelers at home, Cardinals on the road. Titans have been playing hard. Cardinals, for all their faults, have been playing hard. Steelers are in a playoff chase. That's not an easy cakewalk schedule, and they could fall out of a very easy playoff spot with that. So I get the frustration. But I just like this offense too much, and they're going up against an Eagles defense that's terrible right now. This could be a good get-right game for them, especially with the secondary being, I think, the biggest problem with the Eagles. Looking at the Eagles, people want to go make this sort of anti-Jalen Hurts thing, and I'm not as high on Jalen Hurts as everybody else is. I just think he's in a great situation. He's good, but I think he's in a great situation. The offense, I don't think, is the problem. People want to complain about Brian Johnson, but freaking everybody complains about the offensive coordinator. They don't, the play calling's bad. You don't know what play was called, if they called 2 plays in the huddle, who checked the what, if they audibled, if a guy ran the wrong route. Lazy criticism. Brian Johnson's doing a pretty good job with the Eagles, especially for a first-time coordinator. So I don't want to beat up on it too much. Looking at that defense, though, I've been saying this all damn year, that this Eagles team is just not good defensively. And the biggest problem that I have right now is they decided to change play callers, and then they bring Matt Patricia on, for crying out loud. If you're going to make a change of play call, I get Sean Desai, not a very good option, but then after that, you bring in a guy, Matt Patricia, who everywhere he's gone for the last couple years, he's been horrendous. So because of that, I just don't see a path to really immediate changes because Patricia's bad. The defense is built to be bad. You can't wholesale, I think, change it immediately. So I don't know what fans are really expecting here. I will say this, though, too. It is kind of funny, in my opinion. It is kind of funny that Eagles fans rip Jonathan Gannon a new one for all of that, he abandoned the team in the Super Bowl and he doesn't know what he's doing. We want to spite him. Well, look, he's doing okay. I know the Cardinals are bad right now, but, I mean, he does not look like a bumbling buffoon like everybody made him out to be. which I think is it's kind of funny too because all the Eagles fans. I don't typically mind fans being passionate, but some Eagles fans, man, look, I love you. I love the passion. You got to be a little realist about this team. Gannon was a good DC. I think he actually helped overcome some of the structural problems. And now you got to see, all right, maybe Darius Slay isn't a top 5 corner in the league. Maybe James Bradbury isn't dominating. Maybe he's having some problems. Maybe Kevin Byard isn't necessarily the addition that we hoped for. So you get the dueling factors, for lack of a better word, all colliding against one another, multiplied by Sean Desai being terrible, and this is what you get. So because of that, I'm going to say the Seahawks upset the Philadelphia Eagles in primetime. I'm even going to say they put up 31 points, like a 31-28 win. Because this defense is not only bad, it's honestly horrendous. It's one of the worst in the league for teams that are allegedly going to be contenders. Like, if you look at the Eagles right now, their stats, offensively, they're doing okay. 7th in points scored. They're 28th in points allowed. And what makes Jalen Hurts so good is it's what made Lamar Jackson good early in the Ravens' career and actually still makes him good. When they get ahead, they can just bury you because they can run the ball so well. Playing from behind, where Jalen Hurts, even though he can run, has to kind of use his arm entirely, outside of a couple games like the Buffalo game aside, I don't think he's as effective. Still good, not as effective. So because of that, I think if the Seahawks get ahead early, I think it'll be tough for Philly to really get into a shootout with them and dig themselves out of a hole with this Matt Patricia-led defense. So because of that, Seahawks upset. So will I be right? Only one way to find out is to check out Monday Night Football. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, subscribe to Stack in the Box on YouTube. Download us on all the podcast platforms, Apple, Google, Spotify, Overcast. Wherever you get your podcasts, we're on all those sites. Till next time, I am Mike Luciano signing off for the Week 15 recap, and I will see you next Monday.